Night Shifts at Dusk, Confessions by Dawn Roster. My name is Daniel and I keep other people's lives moving while mine idles in fluorescent light. I'm the overnight coordinator for a city hospital. Bed board, transfer calls, a switchboard that talks faster than judgment. On paper I assign rooms, reroute stretchers, authorize diversions, and log every decision like a prayer in triplicate. In practice, I translate appetite. Surgeons want urgency without consequence. Nurses want time to admit exhaustion. Administrators want a census that looks obedient. I carry a pager that lies less than most men, a pencil worn to its ferrule, and a small ledger where I write the names of nights that tried to eat me. I live with Marcus. He's a teacher who brings home chalk dust and patience, who falls asleep with gratting on his chest and wakes up with metaphors in his hair. He kisses me like lesson plans. Planned, improvisational, both at once. We keep a rule on an index card under a magnet shaped like an apple. Say it by Dawn Roster. Our census freeze is 0700. We chose that time the winter we learned midnight honesty turns into theater and afternoons turn into arbitration. Dawn has no patience. Dawn asks for verbs. The Tuesday the beds behaved and I didn't. The hospital pulsed like a hive in heat. At 01:17 a trauma alert barked. At 02:03 psych requested a sitter for a man who believed wires lived under his skin. At 03:49 a NICU ventilator alarmed until the resident remembered it had been silenced for rounds. At 04:58 my phone buzzed with the joint email Marcus and I use for deliveries, dentist reminders, and emergencies that want to be nouns. Thank you for your stay, the Halcyon. Time, 12:083:02. Points, 200 added. Dawn Roster sat up in my chest like a nurse with folded arms. I didn't call him. Our second rule is for things that can still be walked off. 2 loops around the loading dock before nomming it. I walked past laundry carts that confessed detergent, past the ambulance bay where exhaust smelled like memory, past the dumpster that kept its secrets poorly. The sodium lights hummed the sentence concrete prefers. You already know. He introduced himself with a handshake that thought it had earned tenure. Vale, he said, then softened it. Evan. His badge said consultant, patient flow strategist. He'd been hired by administration to optimize throughput, which is how spreadsheets try to run triage. He had a suit the color of anesthesia and a grin like a chart that insists the numbers smile. He stood beside me while I negotiated a transfer with another hospital and nodded like he'd written the playbook. You keep the place from drowning, he said. I keep the place from apologizing in court, I said, initialing a diversion form with my tired wrist. He leaned just enough into my space to measure my oxygen. When you clear a bed for an admission, do you feel it anywhere? He asked, as if empathy were a lab value. In my teeth, I said, and a little behind my eyes. He smiled like he had found a mirror. Drink after shift, he asked. The Halcyon bar forgives men like us. Marcus texted a picture of a stack of essays with a sticky note. 47 metaphors for rain, 3 worth keeping. Dawn Roster. I sent a heart and the apple emoji and meant both. Then a call came through. ICU wanted a bed, and the only thing emptier than my spreadsheet was my chest. The Halcyon bar is engineered to let suits cheat on sleep. Evan sat where the lamps taught cheekbones how to apologize. He asked what it feels like to tell a family we have no beds. I told him it feels like sending a child to knock on a locked door and pretending the knock is progress. He touched the back of my hand with 2 fingers, the place where pulse becomes confession, and he didn't ask here, with his mouth. The elevator asked for him. I said now, because my body sometimes believes in democracy. His sweet smelled like citrus and receipts. He kissed like a man who'd been applauded for restraint and decided to try hunger. He pressed me against the window, and the skyline faked innocence. He was generous where experience coaches generosity, and selfish where a mouth remembers it has teeth. I put my hands where agreements live. We left the lamp on because daylight had been added to the terms on the lobby carpet. After, he lay on his back and stared at the ceiling sprinkler like a minor deity. "You'll forgive him," he said, meaning Marcus, meaning the man who teaches children not to set themselves on fire. "I'll speak by Dawn Roster," I said. He smiled like a memo marked satisfied. Marcus was half asleep when I came in, papers spread across him like blankets that refused. He smelled like chalk and coffee. At 06:59 we stood under the Apple magnet and I gave him nouns. Hotel, elevator, mouth, hands, yes. I didn't apply adjectives. He listened like a man who has seen students invent excuses and knows the cadence of truth. "Do you love him?" he asked, voice flat, not courtroom, not sermon. "I loved the hour where nothing asked me for proof," I said. He nodded, took the marker, and wrote under our rule: "No rooms we can't name at this table. If anything breaks, we break it before sunset together." He underlined together twice, then put his hand around my neck with the gentleness of a man holding back anger. He waited. I said yes. The lamp stayed on until the morning made us irrelevant. Evan didn't vanish like a bad lab. He hovered. He sent me a photo of the ambulance bay at dawn with the caption "Proof," as if sodium light were an affidavit. He learned the names of 2 nurses and said them like currency. He watched me juggle admits and discharges like a priest watching confession, and smiled like he owned the booth. He spoke to the CEO in meetings and called me afterward to translate humanity into slides. The city's gossip vertical posted a grainy halcyon elevator still. My shoulder, his mouth, a caption that tried to pun on triage. Marcus didn't forward it. He printed it, taped it inside the cabinet where we keep spices, and replaced it at dawn with a grocery list. This is how he archives. Nothing heavy at reach. Props want billing. The halcyon called to say housekeeping had found a ring beneath the ottoman in a suite tied to my loyalty number, thin gold, engraved E+D inside like arithmetic playing God. Not mine. The clerk asked if I wanted to claim it. "Hold for owner," I said with my supervisor voice. Work tried to save me with honest difficulty. A psych patient barricaded himself with cafeteria chairs. A nurse fainted mid-shift and we had to treat our own. A surgeon demanded a bed for a VIP while the hallway filled with stretchers who had earned it more. I logged, I authorized, I lied with accuracy. Evan texted, "You're very good when the room is afraid." I typed, "I prefer accurate," and didn't send it. Then security pinged me with a red badge where red should never be. In a family waiting room taped under a chair, they'd found a recorder, cheap, patient. Its tiny led a private confession. It had been capturing whispers meant only for the floor. A mother rehearsing how to say goodbye, a husband whispering names like medication, a child humming to a doll. The sticker on its battery belonged to a firm administration had hired to capture authentic patient voices. Evan had mentioned them once over whiskey, with the casualness of a man name-dropping accomplices. I peeled the device off with a gloved hand and placed it in a Ziploc like a splinter. Legal wrote a memo with "regrettable" 4 times and "consent" twice. We printed signs in 3 languages, "recording without consent prohibited." We taped them beside the coffee machines because even grief deserves boundaries. I told Marcus at Dawn Roster. He brewed tea because he said my heart didn't need coffee to remember itself. "Are we being interesting?" he asked. "Or are we being us?" He always frames it as a choice between 2 trains on the same track. "Us," I said, and meant it like a discharge order. Evan tried a finale only men who think narratives are currencies attempt. He waited for me by the staff elevator with the ring between his fingers, the engraving flashing like an insult. "Say my name," he said softly. He meant Evan and also the other thing men mean when they want jurisdiction. "Evan," I said, then added, "exit." His smile was cruel and tired. He pocketed the ring like a receipt and called me precise. I told him I prefer accurate. He laughed like it was a reference. "If you came for erotics notarized." There was a wall and a yes and hands where we said hands would be, a mouth that believed in the moment more than the man. The lamp stayed on because daylight had been added to the terms long before. It was heat without metaphor and a head that briefly stopped counting beds. If you came for intrigue plated, there was a ring engraved with arithmetic, a recorder taped where grief tried to hide, an elevator camera that believes it's literature, a consultant who billed desire as efficiency. If you came for redemption, hospitals don't sell it. We sell discharge summaries. The ring's other initial belonged to a Carter. There is always a Carter, who arrived with a lawyer polished in compassion and retrieved it like an overdue chart. He nodded at me in the lobby, the nod that says thank you for not publishing the wrong notes. I nodded back with the nod that says we both owe silence. Marcus and I practiced boring until we remembered it is a craft. One night in the kitchen, he put his hand on my throat with the gentleness of a man checking a pulse and asked, "Here." I said, "Now," because consent loves schedules. After, he laughed into my shoulder like the bell curve finally broke. We ate toast that charred unevenly and didn't apologize. The lamp behaved. Work stayed work. A child recovered enough to ask for fries. A nurse cried into her hands after transferring 3 patients, and I gave her my pager for 5 minutes. A paramedic kissed his partner in the ambulance bay, and the camera caught it and refused to tell. I filed, I signed, I tried to remember what bodies deserve. Sometimes at 03:00 I stand in the ambulance bay and watch the streetlights breathe. The city inhales, the monitors sigh, the ledger fills. I think of my father teaching me how to carry someone without making it look like weight. I think of the index card on our fridge and how paper is alive when it isn't laminated. I think of a ring engraved with arithmetic and how math flatters too much. We added a line to our card because rules need friends. In Marcus's classroom script, if you burn something, do it where I can help find water. We didn't laminate it. The magnet holds. Evan will find another ward to haunt, another hotel to rehearse sincerity in, another ring to engrave with somebody else's initials. I will still carry a pager, a pencil, and the stubborn refusal to make interesting stories out of bad nights. For a few hours at a time, I keep the hospital polite. For a few hours at a time, I believe in accuracy. Then I go home to a man who grades metaphors for rain and waits for my nouns. At dawn roster, I say the thing. We practice again. And when the beds complain and the monitors blink like conscience, I breathe, I check the census. And I tell the city gently where to sleep.